and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana, 104.5 FM, and UPTV. My name is Mr. Garza, and I will be your host for this evening, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, or UPTV. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, I mean myself. Pretty much, that's it. So, I realize that the radio version is comes out sometimes, and then the UPTV version comes out at a different time, and that some of this stuff is way out of whack, and some of this news has been, really out of date for when you hear it or see it. I'm trying to get more relevant, more caught up, so that what I'm doing is at least in the vicinity of the actual date when you're liable to see it and or hear it. But there's always going to be a difference, because the radio show is an hour long and the TV version is a half an hour long. So I end up with extra versions and getting behind or getting ahead, depending on how you look at it. It's very confusing. But anyway, with the throughout much of the last 4 years, it almost didn't matter that much, because it was just an ongoing onslaught, and a lot of the situations and the stories about what the administration was trying to do were ongoing and were continuous, and just they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing on a lot of these things. So what was happening one week would still be relevant in a way. A couple of weeks later, a judge might have slapped it down, or they may have made more progress on it, or they may have changed something. But it all was kind of within the same realm. But now with the election and the countdown until the days when the person in the White House, the current person in the White House, is gone, the news will be changing, the situation will be changing, and a lot of the stories are going to be different. So I am trying to get more current with these shows, or at least have them come out a lot closer to the date that I actually record them. So we'll see how good a job I do at that. I don't know. I purposefully don't tell you the day that I'm recording it when I do record it, like right now, because I don't want them to be too dated, too specifically dated. But maybe I should start doing that. I don't know. We will see. In any event, as I speak, the election has happened. The Electoral College has voted. We're just waiting on the formality, which is going to be a rough 30 days or however many days it is until the actual inauguration. It's going to be rough, because there are a lot of games going on still, and Trump is still playing all sorts of stupid games, and there are people making wild accusations, and it's really a ridiculous time. I have never in my life experienced anything like this, as no one else has either, because there has never been this kind of nonsense before, at least not in this volume and to this extent. But things are changing. So anyway, an election-related story here, entitled "For Immigrants, Election Promises Relief from an Atmosphere of Terror." And that may sound like hyperbole, but really, for a lot of people, it isn't, and it hasn't been. An atmosphere of terror is a good way of describing what it's felt like for a lot of people throughout maybe the entire last 4 years, or at least parts of it. It's been an awful time for a lot of people, and not just immigrants. I mean, there's a lot of people who've suffered under this administration in various ways. Immigrants have taken the brunt of the actual in-your-face attacks, but there are a lot of people suffering in a lot of different ways. I mean, if you just look at the pandemic and realize over 300,000 people in this country have died. And that doesn't even come close to counting all the people who've been severely affected by, had their health ruined for periods of time, maybe permanently in some instances, by this pandemic, all because we had an administration that didn't want to admit that it existed and did everything they could to avoid dealing with it in any direct way until or unless they had to. So atmosphere of terror is a really good way of describing what the last 4 years have been like for a lot of people. And it can't come to an end any too soon. I'm usually not in a big rush to get from one month to the next, but I would love it if it were already January 17th instead of December 17th, just to hasten the end of this ridiculousness. Anyway, this story reads as follows. For years, immigrants in the Atlanta suburbs lived in fear that a routine traffic stop would lead to deportation. Thousands of immigrants in the country illegally have been deported for minor offenses, advocates say, because of close ties between county jails and immigration authorities. But now there are some new sheriffs in town. Quote, I'm the sheriff of Gwinnett County for everybody, regardless of your race, regardless of your gender, regardless of your immigration status, said Kibo Taylor, the sheriff-elect in Gwinnett County outside Atlanta. The 2020 election is expected to usher in a major shift in immigration enforcement. On the federal level, the Biden administration plans to rein in immigration and customs enforcement, starting with a temporary moratorium on deportations. On the local level, a number of sheriffs known for their hardline immigration stances retired or lost their re-election bids. In Georgia, the blue wave that delivered the state to Biden also helped to elect several county sheriffs who have pledged to limit how they cooperate with ICE. Taylor is a Democrat and the first black man ever elected to the job. He ran on a promise to get rid of long-standing cooperation agreements with ICE signed by his Republican predecessor. He says he'll follow through on that promise the first day he takes office in January. Taylor says there's no evidence that the agreement was helping public safety, and, he says, it was hurting trust in law enforcement in his county, where more than 1 in 4 residents was born outside the U.S. It definitely undermined the confidence and trust and transparency between law enforcement and the community, said Taylor. In neighboring Cobb County, Democrat Craig Owens ousted the longtime Republican sheriff. Owens has pledged to end his county's agreement with ICE, too. Quote, there's nothing that we can find anywhere to say the program took a large scale of violent criminals off the road, Owens said. From my perspective, it seems like it's doing more profiling of individuals versus keeping our community safe. These 287G agreements, as they are formally known, have been around since the mid-2000s. They were supposed to make it easier to identify and deport dangerous criminals. But in practice, critics say these agreements have created a deportation pipeline, particularly in the Atlanta suburbs, where immigrant advocates say police use traffic violations as a pretext to pull over anyone who looks Latino or like an immigrant. Here's how it worked, according to advocates. First, the immigrant gets pulled over and detained, often for driving without a license or insurance. Then a sheriff deputy at the county jail calls ICE. It's created an atmosphere of terror for immigrant communities going about their lives, said Azed Shalshani, a lawyer with Project South, an advocacy group based in Atlanta. It's hard to overstate how relieved those communities are to see these agreements coming to an end. We are so happy. We are crying here at the office waiting for the results of the election, said Adalina Nichols, director and co-founder of the Georgia Latino Alliance for Human Rights, which has been working toward ending these agreements for years. This has been a long journey with a lot of suffering and family separations as well. But not all immigrant communities are heaving a sigh of relief. Several sheriffs known for their hardline stance on immigration fended off challengers who said they would end Local 287G agreements. High-profile sheriffs who won re-election include Sheriff Bill Waybourn in Tarrant County, Texas, and Bob Galtieri, the sheriff in Pinellas County, Florida. Waybourn has been particularly outspoken about his support for ICE and its work. He drew national attention for his remarks at a White House press conference last year. Standing alongside the ICE director, Waybourn said that many of the immigrants in his jails are criminals and repeat offenders. If we have to turn them loose or they get released, they're coming back to your neighborhood and my neighborhood, he said. These drunks will run over your children and they will run over my children. In an interview, Galtieri said, the perception of the program leads people to the erroneous belief that it's all bad when it's not. We have people that are in this country illegally and they've committed crimes, he said. We don't want to release them back into the community, especially when those crimes are serious crimes. Federal immigration enforcement might change next year, but Galtieri said the sheriff's office in Pinellas County will not. And so this is, that's the age-old pretense that a lot of people use to justify their bigotry, their prejudice, even their racism. It always centers around crime when you think about it. Like, why are you against this or that? So if you ask people, for example, why do you oppose Black Lives Matter? I mean, what could be wrong with saying that Black Lives Matter? And they go, oh, well, the group, they riot, they burn things down. I mean, it's always like finding some crime, scary sort of crime that is adjacent to or near to or can be connected in some way to a community, and then just targeting the entire community based on that crime that you say this is what I'm fighting here, is this crime. It's not these people who happen to be criminals. It's the crime that we're working against. And this has been particularly true with immigrants. It's been shown time and time again that immigrants tend to be less inclined to commit dangerous or violent crimes than their native-born counterparts in communities, and yet they are always tarred as this guy was doing. It was say, oh, these are dangerous criminals that we're getting rid of. In a handful of cases, maybe so. But primarily what these agreements in particular serve to do is to make it easy to identify immigrants for ICE who can then come and take them away. And driving without insurance or not stopping fully at a stop sign but kind of sliding through it, or all the different things that people get stopped for, having a tail light out, all these excuses to stop people. And this happened before Trump was around. This was going on early in the days of, during the Obama administration. We were fighting this. This is where the whole driver's licenses for undocumented people came from. The whole idea was, look, a lot of people are being stopped for driving without a license. Why don't they have a license? Because they're not citizens, and they have to drive for some reason, to go to work, to do their jobs, to take care of their families, whatever. But they can't get a driver's license because of their immigration status. So you've created this class, this class of people, of criminals, people who drive without licenses. And so a lot of those people were just picked up for driving without a license. ICE comes and get them, and they're gone. And they're creating criminals. And the same thing is true of a lot of these traffic stops that are used as pretext in these situations. So it's not even necessarily that this group of people exhibits any kind of extraordinary criminal behavior, but you can create by looking at the social situations of that certain groups tend to be in. You can create laws that, or you can identify laws. You can create them, and you can also just identify existing laws and then enforce them more assiduously in those areas, and you therefore have somehow we don't know how, I just explained how, you therefore have suddenly created an criminal class that includes a large number of people from this group that you want to vilify in some way. So that's how a lot of this stuff works, and that's how it has been working and will continue to work for some people because they can't let go of it. But at least having an administration that is not actively trying to turn immigrants into somehow an alien. I don't even know how to put it. I mean, they're trying to create, the Trump administration has been trying to create immigrants as, turn them into a scapegoat for a lot of people's problems, and to make people hate them, and to make them appear so much worse than they actually are, that people then support your efforts to keep them away. And at least having an administration that is not actively trying to do that is going to be a huge help, just right off the bat. So again, I can't wait till the end of January to just put some of this behind. It's going to be hard. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. Let me move on to a different story here. This is entitled 69%, that's 69%, of undocumented immigrant workers have jobs essential to fighting COVID, says study. The study, based on 2019 Census Bureau data, also said that 69% of undocumented immigrant workers have jobs deemed essential to the COVID fight. Well, wait a minute. That's exactly what the title just said. That's repeating the title. Anyway, more than 2/3 of undocumented immigrants have frontline jobs considered essential to the U.S. fight against COVID-19. Now they've repeated it 3 times in this story before we even get to anything else. 69 of them. Okay. This keeps repeating the same thing over and over again. Okay. 69% of undocumented immigrant workers have jobs deemed essential by the Department of Homeland Security, according to the study, which is based on the 2019 American Community Survey by the Census Bureau. The study also estimated that nearly 1 in 5 essential workers is an immigrant. By contrast, the Trump administration has argued that protecting American jobs against foreign workers is crucial to fixing the economic harm caused by COVID-19. In April, Trump signed an executive order temporarily suspending immigration to ensure that unemployed Americans of all backgrounds will be first in line for jobs as our economy reopens. In June, Trump extended the order through the end of the year. Undocumented immigrants make up 11% of agriculture workers, 2% of healthcare workers, and 6% of food services and production workers, the study estimated. Elizabeth Valencia, 54, on temporary protected status that allows some Salvadorans to work and live in the United States, said she was the only geriatric nursing assistant serving 28 COVID-19 positive residents at a nursing home in Maryland earlier this year after an outbreak affected the staff. Valencia has lived in the U.S. for 20 years and has worked in the nursing home for almost 18 years, starting as cleaning staff before she trained to be a nursing assistant. And let me say, as an aside, 20 years. Think about where you were 20 years ago, and think about how long that is. If you've lived here for 20 years, you are an American, as far as I'm concerned, in any way, shape, or form that you want to be. And the paperwork, the little bit of names and dates on some form somewhere means nothing. You've been here for 20 years. She's worked 18 years at the same job. She belongs here just as much as anybody else. Anyway, back to our story. Valencia said all of her co-workers on the floor where she cares for dementia patients are immigrants. The residents cannot survive by themselves, she said. They need us. The study also found that 70% of the immigrants working in essential jobs have lived in the U.S. for more than 10 years, and 60% speak English. Nearly 1 million of the essential workers are dreamers protected by Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, the study found. Although DACA, enacted by former President Barack Obama, won a challenge by the Trump administration in a Supreme Court ruling earlier this year, a new case in Texas could end the policy. DACA recipient Jonathan Rodas works as an operating room assistant at the Greater Baltimore Medical Center while he is attending nursing school. Rodas and his entire household, including his undocumented stepfather, all tested positive for COVID-19 in July. They have now all fully recovered, and no one was hospitalized. But Rodas said he was especially worried about his stepfather needing to be hospitalized because he, like other undocumented immigrants, does not have health insurance. Rodas is now back to work. He said he is not surprised by the study that found 1 in 5 essential workers are immigrants. There's a lot of people out there who want to do that job because they're scared of it. Oh, sorry, I misread that. Let me try it again. There's not a lot of people out there who want to do that job because they're scared of it, Rodas said, talking about working in a hospital during a pandemic. I'm scared of it, but I do it for the patient, the passion that I have to help people out. So yeah, again, let me digress again, as I tend to do. When you peel back the covers, the curtains, and look who's behind, who's making things happen, in grocery stores, in restaurants, in businesses all over the place, particularly in hospitals and healthcare situations, you find immigrants all over the place in these jobs. They take these kinds of jobs. And we have all, in one way or another, been relying on them very heavily throughout this pandemic to get us the things we need so that we can stay home and go, oh, I'm going to be careful. Oh, I'll wear a mask and only go to the store once every 2 weeks or something like that. We're able to do that because there are lots and lots of people who don't do that, who can't do that, who are showing up to work, who are stocking the shelves, who are packaging the things, who are processing the raw materials, who are picking the food, who are, cleaning the rooms, who are helping us in all sorts of different ways. All of us, like myself, I include myself in that list of very privileged people who I stay home 90% of the time. I don't go out any more than I have to. I don't go to any more places than I need to. And I'm able to do that because there are people who aren't able to do that. And it's astounding when you think about it. I mean, if I could go out and thank all of them individually, I would. I don't know them. I don't see them. They're not standing out there right in front of everything where you can go, oh, well, look, these are the people that are helping. They're in the shadows, or they're doing invisible work that you've seen so much that you don't even think about it. But they're keeping us going, and they will continue to do that for a while. And any of us who is able to avoid, dangerous situations repeatedly owes our ability to do that to these people. And a lot of them are immigrants. So keep that in mind. Anyway, moving forwards. Our next article is entitled, Congressional Democrats Announce One of the Most Progressive Immigration Reform Plans in History. Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. I'm also looking not forward to Republicans fighting it every step of the way, but at least, this is a step in the right direction. And there are two branches of government now, the administrative and congressional, that are going to push this forward. And with any luck in the Georgia recount, maybe we'll get the Senate too, and then we just have to fight with all of Trump's picks in the judicial branch. But at least it's a less lopsided fight than it has been for a while now. And I'm sorry, there is a large fly in this room. Where it came from, I don't know. It's December. It's snowy outside, but I have a fly flying around my room here. You're out of season there, bud. This is not your time. Anyway, moving on. So, progressive Democrats in the House of Representatives are gearing up to demand a comprehensive overhaul of the U.S. immigration system. I think I said everywhere. When the Biden administration and a new Congress are in place early next year. This reform effort will go beyond reversing the Trump administration's extreme anti-immigrant policies, with the stated goal of creating a fair immigration process that upholds our values. Representative Pramila Jayapal, Democrat from Washington, I think, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, announced this new campaign for immigration reform on December 11th. According to Jayapal, she will introduce a resolution called the Roadmap to Freedom as soon as the new Congress is seated. The resolution's premise is it is the duty of the federal government to develop and implement a roadmap to freedom in order to overhaul the outdated immigration system in the United States that has gone without significant reform for decades, and to relieve the great human impact an unjust system bears on communities around the country. The roadmap goes far beyond the immigration reforms promised by President-elect Biden, but there is substantial overlap between the two. Both have pledged to create a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, end for-profit detention, not end for profit, but end for-profit detention. If I read it correctly, it makes sense. Invest in community-based alternatives to detention, and enhance protections for immigrant workers. However, the roadmap goes much further by calling for the restoration of immigrants' access to the social safety net. It calls for an overhaul of the immigration court system and the penalties it imposes. The roadmap also seeks to offer redress to people who have suffered from the inequities of the immigration system in the past. Among the many components of the roadmap are creating a pathway to citizenship for the nation's 10.5 million undocumented immigrants, clearing the existing backlog of naturalization applications, prioritizing family unity by eliminating barriers to family reunification and creating a process for eligible individuals who are deported, detained, or in sanctuary to reunite with their families and return to the United States. Establishing a system of scalable civil consequences to immigration violations so that detention and deportation are not the default punishment for almost every infraction of immigration law.